Welcome to another episode of the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown. I'm here today joined by Debbie Silversmith and Susie Gordy from the Research Administration Office. When you think about helping BYU technologies get into the marketplace, you might think the way to do that is by being an entrepreneur and licensing a startup company, and that is true, but not everyone's in a position or stage of life where they want to do that. Another great way to get our technologies closer to the market is to sponsor research at BYU. By funding research, you can take a technology from just an idea to something that could actually make it to the marketplace. And the people you work with for that are the Research Administration Office staff. So, Debbie, do you want to give us just background on who you guys are, what your areas are, and so on?
Thanks, Dave, for inviting us to be part of this podcast. We're excited to share a little bit more about what our office does. I wanted to share right off the bat our mission. The Research Administration Office, we are here to support faculty, students, staff, and university administration in efforts to encourage and enable research, creative activities, and other expressions of academic scholarship. And I think this fits right into the BYU mission statement, including one of the educational goals that is scholarly research and creative endeavor among both faculty and students, including those in selected graduate programs of real consequence, are essential and will be encouraged. And our office helps enable that research. We also believe that all parts of the Research Administration Office fulfill President Kimball's charge that is to become the world's greatest institution of learning. And President Reese's statement that becoming BYU will require enriching the student experience and strengthening our already student-centric approach. Another thing that Shane Reese has talked about is faculty being having a dual role or being experts in both the secular areas and spiritual. And having experience with externally funded research helps faculty become even better experts in their fields. And so our office helps with that. The Research Administration Office, we have 4 distinct areas, and I wanted to show a little bit on our website. So the Sponsored Projects Office, which is me and Susie, Maren Red, and Jean Larson, our research.
So that would be, could be the federal government or an outside corporation or whoever is coming and, putting money into research at the university. That's what you're doing, right?
Yes, through the Sponsored Projects Office. Wanted to make a correction that our office, we have 4 research administrators, me, Susie, Maren, Britt, and Jean Larson, our director, who has kind of a dual role. He's the director of all of our Research Administration Office, but he also has some sponsored projects assignments. And then there's the area of research compliance. And this is where we have the Institutional Review Board, or the HRPP, which is the Human Research Protection Program. And then the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or the ICA Committee, the Institutional Biosafety Committee, or the IBC Committee, as well as LARC, which is you need a med ID to get into that. The LARC is the Animal Care group that takes care of all of the animals on campus. So that is Laboratory Animal Resource Center.
And in these cases, right, Debbie, there is research you can do on human subjects. Like this looks like an exercise science sort of thing, or there are animal experiments and things. These things are allowed, they're just heavily regulated, right?
Exactly. So we have committees to review applications that faculty submit to get that research approved. And that's all a part of our office. So Susie and I will be representing the Sponsored Projects Office and that area of our office, since we are the area that deals most frequently with, or works with tech transfer most frequently. And in a nutshell, our office, we guide all research proposals through internal approvals and submission to the external funders. And we can negotiate the contracts upon award and take care of any contractual needs throughout the project. And so specifically, it's external research funds. BYU has lots of internal programs, but we're only dealing with the external, either federal government or industry foundations. That's kind of research funds coming through BYU.
And is your first contact usually the professor reaching out to you about a research project, or are companies and government agencies coming to you?
It's usually the faculty member that is coming to us. Sometimes it's research, or it's the research division of a company, but usually they've already found a faculty member to work with, and we work directly with the faculty member to get things going. And we'll talk about that further in response to other questions.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, So this, you mentioned that your office deals most with tech transfer of any of the research offices. That's definitely true. And this might be a question for Susie, who's one of the research administrators there. And Susie, you might want to state what area you're over if you would as well. But what are some frequent ways that tech transfer and RAO interact?
I deal with the College of Physical Mathematical Sciences as well as the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. In the past, I've also worked with the College of Education and Humanities. So it gives me a broader perspective on the different types of projects that do come through.
And if people are not familiar, phys math would include like statistics and chemistry and physics, these sorts of things, right?
Yes, computer science,
Yeah.
geology, etc. So there's quite a few different areas within each of the colleges that we deal with. Some are a little more prolific with their research than others, but we're here to serve all of them equally. I found there are about four or five ways that BYU's Research Administration Office, specifically sponsored projects, intersects with technology transfer when it comes to sponsored research. So there's kind of two phases. We call it pre-award and post-award. In the pre-award stage is where the proposals are being developed, and those proposals might be submitted to federal agencies, to industry partners, to societies and foundations, etc. All of those would come to our office, and if they happen to deal with an existing technology or background IP, then at the proposal stage, we would reach out to tech transfer and ask if this new project could continue and isn't going to interfere with existing license agreements that might be in place. In addition, at the proposal stage, there are also some federal sponsors or national labs that want to have intellectual property terms, or I'll refer to them going forward as IP terms, that need to be agreed upon at the proposal stage. That's not very frequent, but when they do, we have to make sure we're willing to agree to those before a proposal actually gets submitted. The other area at that stage is when there are faculty-owned companies or companies that they're involved with, and they might have a conflict of interest, whether that's financial or other. Those need to be resolved at the proposal stage. And when there is an existing technology with BYU and these entities, then we need to reach out, coordinate with tech transfer to ensure that going forward, the project isn't going to interfere with those, that they're going to align with them, and there won't be any complications going forward.
So I think, can I put a hypothetical, typical complex situation, I think, would be one where maybe a company's licensed the technology from BYU, and now they're developing it further, and so they come to you, I want to do some additional research, and I also want the professor to be a consultant with the company. You know, the company is just doing whatever it can to develop its product, so it can get a little complex, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And BYU allows professors to wear two hats, if you will, but they can't wear three hats, because then you're compromising potentially the integrity of the research project that they're going forward with. We want to ensure that the integrity of the projects going forward aren't being compromised because they are thinking that, oh, well, I'm the owner. I want to make sure that this looks good for my company and my company is going to benefit from this. We don't want that to slant the results in any way. And so that's why we go through a conflict of interest process when they are involved in a company in some other way, to ensure that that is going to be smooth and there won't be questions that arise later on that. The other ways that we intersect with tech transfer is more on the end. And when we have different terms and conditions, certs and assurances, those types of terms that come through from the government, from industry, et cetera, we need to negotiate them. And often they have fairly intense IP terms that we need to work with tech transfer on, because you guys are more the experts in that than we are. We have certain things that we're familiar with, we understand the basics, but it's really up to you to help us ensure that we're protecting the individual here at BYU as well as the institution, to ensure that we are not overstepping, that we aren't under-protecting what is owned here at BYU by the work that's being done.
And, you know, one thing you worry about in a large organization, BYU has, 32,000 students or so, hundreds of faculty members. What you don't want is for one hand to not know what the other hand's doing. And my sense, at least, is Research Administration Office and Tech Transfer Office here do a great job of communicating. So we have like very few situations that are, I mean, I can't think of a recent situation that was mishandled in some way.
Yeah, that really is a huge part of what we want to do. We don't want to necessarily see negative PR come about because we didn't do our due diligence and trying to ensure things are set the way that they need to be.
Nice. Well, great. Well, much appreciated. Thank you. And so, Debbie, for people who are new to sponsored research agreements, can you give us just an idea of kind of basic terms, or what would be a typical agreement? I know there's kind of no typical agreement, but.
Yeah, well, we do have a standard research agreement template that we'd like to use, and that is also on our website. People are welcome to check that out. It's public, just right here under templates and research agreement template with industry, and that's what it's geared toward. And mainly there are some essential information about the project as far as start and end dates, title, who the faculty member involved will be, and of course the dollar amount that will be given to BYU to use for the research. And I know the typical funding that we usually receive, there's not a typical amount. We see, research agreements from $5,000 up to, $500,000. And so it just varies widely just depending on the needs of the project. Also within the project, our research agreement for each project, there's standard terms about publication. We do reserve the right to publish. We do give the sponsor an opportunity to review any publication beforehand so that they can request the removal of any proprietary information because we don't want to, put information out there that is proprietary. But we do reserve the right to publish our research. That's why what we're here for is to disseminate research results. And then also there's, intellectual property terms that we will work through. And some other standard terms and conditions that you see, indemnification or other things. But usually there are some project deliverables, and usually that is a research report on the results. Sometimes it's a widget. It just varies depending on the project.
Well, thanks, Debbie. That's helpful. Getting down to details like this is helpful. Just for anyone listening, I want to make it clear, though, that I think our process here is very streamlined. We're talking about complexities here, but it ends up not being a super complex project. To enter into one of these agreements. And in fact, I think sponsored research at BYU gives sponsors an incredible bang for the buck, better probably than at most other institutions. Is that true? And why would it be true?
I'm not sure because I haven't, been in this role in a different institution, and I haven't heard anything about, whether we are a better deal. However, if I am aware that our indirect cost rate may be lower than other institutions because I do see those when we sub out, parts of our research projects to other institutions. But there are some institutions where our indirect cost rate is the same, but we are lower than many. And that may be partly because BYU depends heavily on student employees to help the university run, for instance, in facilities or custodial or the grounds crew. And if those positions were filled with full-time staff, then our indirect cost rate would be even higher.
So an indirect cost rate is, just for anyone unaware, that's the portion of the research funding that goes to cover overhead costs, right?
Exactly. The building, lights, payroll, all of that helps the research project even happen. So, and then also I do believe that BYU uses our students or involves them in research projects more than other universities, as opposed to hiring research staff that would be full-time and, have full benefits. Whereas BYU were just encouraged to mentor students as much as possible. And so I know faculty try to do that and hire graduate students or even undergraduate students to help perform research projects. And in essence, that saves money on the project as well. So as opposed to, hiring a postdoc or a full-time research staff.
And I should mention that most of our technologies that are disclosed to tech transfer have student inventors, and not just most, like the overwhelming majority. So they're very involved in the research, and they're great bang for the buck there.
That is awesome. One other point I want to mention is that BYU, of all the research funds that come into BYU, about 27% go directly to student support, either wages or tuition. And that's a lot higher than other universities. Our neighboring universities, most of them are under 10%. as far as their
Wow.
research and going to students.
So if you were going to set out, say you're some wealthy alumnus or something, and you like, I want to help students, initially your mind would go to, well, I should set up a scholarship or something, right? But actually, if you fund research, more than a quarter of that funding is going straight to the students, and it's paying them to do work that they want to do that's interesting and advancing their career.
Exactly.
Great. My other sense is, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I know at many universities, professors pull their salary from their research funding. And my sense is that that's not really what happens at BYU. Faculty are on salaries, and the research funding is just going into research.
That is the case. That is the case a lot of the time. Faculty's academic salary does pay for them to teach classes, but also do research. And so they only have the summers available to request research salary, spring, summer salary funded by a research project. And so sometimes faculty don't even take that option, that they're going to advise, they're going to work with their students throughout the project, but it'll be, mainly funding the students' work on the project. And so I do know a lot of faculty do not request salary from a project, but that's not always the case. It does depend on the project.
Okay. And just anecdotally, I can tell you, I've had companies, like I would say many companies, tell me that they feel like they get more bang for their buck here. And we also have faculty that I always say could be anywhere. They could be at whatever Ivy League school is prestigious. They choose to be at BYU because they agree with the mission and feel motivated to be here. So from that, well, good. So in collaborating with external entrepreneurs, say an entrepreneur wanted to engage with the Research Administration Office to collaborate on projects. What's the typical pathway? How would they go about that?
Yeah, I recommend they first start with the faculty members. Find a faculty member that you're interested in their research, on funding their research, on, talk to them. And I do know that many faculty have met people or met potential research partners or sponsors after they've given a presentation at a research conference. The faculty member will say, hey, this, company approached me after they heard my presentation and they want to fund this research. And so that's a lot of it, that potential partners are finding out about the research with the faculty member or from the faculty member directly. And once the faculty member and a possible research partner have a potential project in mind, then the faculty member will work with our office, use our grant management system to get internal approvals on the proposal or the proposed project. And then we get a budget finalized, get internal approvals. And then once the funder approves that proposal, then sponsored projects will work with the funder to get a research agreement in place. And we also collaborate with the faculty member, depending, to find out the different project needs when we're working through different terms and conditions. And so then we'll work directly with the sponsor to negotiate an agreement. But usually it starts with the faculty member and interacting with the potential research partner. I did also want to share that sometimes when a project is only going to be direct student support, BYU does have the Careers and Experiential Learning Office that has a partnering hub, and potential partners, this might be a good avenue for some projects. And so we recommend people check out this website. We're not experts in this area, so we, direct people to this partnering hub and working with the Careers and Experiential Learning Office to talk about other projects. But that may be another avenue for partners.
Yeah, sometimes business people will come to me and say, look, we have this product that we want to develop. What professor at BYU could do this for us? If it's a specific research project, professors have their own academic research avenues they're pursuing. So it's hard to make a match like that. So that might be more something for the partnering hub here. But if you were a business person or an alumnus who just said, well, what technologies just need a little bump to get to the finish line, you could talk to me about that. I would have some ideas and know of some of those. So
that's awesome.
Yep. Great. Well, good. Well, great. Thanks, Debbie. So Susie, you were talking about interacting with the tech transfer office. What are some success stories, or I know you're kind of on the front end because you're on the research, but what are some cases that have led to commercial success that you can think of?
Last year, I worked with about half a dozen projects that intersected with tech transfer in here. Most of them are continuation projects we don't often know what the results are as far as how successful they become until we read about it in the newspaper or in an online announcement, etc. But it's always thrilling to see how successful they have become and where they started at and where they've actually ended up. So some of the projects that I worked with were supported by federal funds, industry funds, etc. And they were from the chem area, physics and astronomy, and computer science. Those are the ones that come to mind. One of them had to deal with repurposing a drug that had already been developed by this professor in his own company and his associates there, and the opportunity to align it with a different condition to see if it might help alleviate and not necessarily cure, but help alleviate conditions, et cetera, associated with a new type of condition or disease that they hadn't thought of before. And that's really exciting to see that a drug that maybe has lost its use, isn't being needed as much, could potentially be re-engaged and assist in other ways. Another one is a phase 2 product that has gone through like an SBIR, TTR situation, but sometimes the funding comes in different phases. If you're successful at one phase, then you're invited to continue on to another phase. And this particular one has to deal with stealthy power system attacks. So that's something is very intriguing to many people on this day and age. Another one that I can think of.
And that one, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the one that we ended up commercializing through a startup called Achilles Heel.
That's correct.
Which is out there and has gotten some big grants. Important cybersecurity startup that we think is doing really well.
Yeah, that one is funded not just with Achilles Heel, but the Department of Energy right now is the one that's involved with this second phase of that particular project.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think those grants, if someone really wanted to, I believe you can go online and look up federal grants and see who's being funded. Is that right?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Another one that comes to mind is a private sector that has funded multiple phases of a particular project that is developing miniaturized bioimpedance electronics, which is something that will be inserted into the body and protected in a protective coating so that it doesn't, the body doesn't react to it so much. And I think this one's in about phase 4 of that one. So the professors involved have been able to advance it in multiple ways and hopefully will eventually get to a conclusion successfully. But
what people might not realize, sorry, Susie, the federal funding often has multiple phases, which is kind of what you would hope for. You do some initial phase 1 research to see if this thing is working. And if so, then you get a follow-on grant, maybe several, right?
That's correct. I know NIH, the National Institutes of Health, is really hoping to have long-term research associations with professors because they understand that building upon what's there continuously is what comes to an end result that has a lot of different uses, a lot of successful uses in that realm of things. So a long-term association is really what some of the federal sponsors are looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, terrific. Well, those, we could probably go on all day connecting the dots between research and companies that have actually been launched. It's super important. What tech transfer is doing really at BYU or any university is taking these research results and making sure they're not just results, that they actually end up in companies. And so many of these have. It's been great. So let's see, Debbie, how do we navigate intellectual property issues though? In research sponsorship, if you're a company sponsoring research or any entrepreneur, one of the questions you're asking is, okay, I'm putting money into research. What are the odds that I'll end up having some intellectual property that I can use? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. Right. That's one of the questions that we do ask in our internal approval process on a proposal, just so that we are aware of any potential. And then it just helps us when we're negotiating a research agreement with the sponsor. So when our sponsored projects administrators are negotiating a research agreement and working out IP language, our ultimate goal is to protect the BYU created IP. And so our standard research agreement language lists BYU as owning the BYU created IP. However, our standard language is open enough and intentionally not a license agreement, so that after the IP has been created and during the course of the project, that then the tech transfer office can then negotiate an appropriate license agreement with the external partners. And so in our standard agreement, there is language that they will have the opportunity to let us know. And so
essentially, I'm sorry, go ahead. So essentially there's an option agreement, or at least an exclusive negotiation period built into the agreement.
Exactly. And we, try to set things up as friendly as possible to both parties, BYU and the sponsor, so that when technology is created, that we're in the best position to for you guys to negotiate an appropriate license.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we aren't exactly sure what the technology will be. Maybe there is an idea, or maybe it's partially developed already, but until it's fully known, I think it is wisest to wait to negotiate a license agreement. So our template research agreement is just, I think, very vanilla. It's great.
Yeah, it's good, and the bottom line is it works.
Mm-hmm.
Like research sponsors, especially repeat sponsors here, are very comfortable with it, and they just know if something comes along, we'll be able to negotiate something with BYU. And tech transfer, I believe we have a pretty solid reputation with people for being reasonable and not being weirdly aggressive with royalties or anything else. So, but okay, perfect. Well, thanks. So maybe last kind of substantive question here. What if a professor, like especially a new professor, might be starting from scratch? Like, how do I get research funding? If a researcher comes to you and says, look, I need funding, what kind of help is available for them?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different areas. So on campus, we have a research development office, which most colleges have a research development specialist that can actually help them with the nuts and bolts of getting their proposal internally approved within our system. As far as, and then it comes to our office for, finalization and internal approvals and submission to the sponsor. So that's the steps, as far as faculty, when they have something that they need funding for. If it is technology that needs to be developed, one avenue that has been used quite a bit is the SPI or STTR programs that the different federal agencies have. However, those proposals are submitted from the companies that are trying to develop the technology. And a lot of those programs do require a research institution be involved and be included as a sub-awardee on those grants. And so we have done a lot of that. We've been a sub-award on an SBIR, which is Small Business Innovation Research, and then STTR, which is the Small Business Technology Transfer Research. And so we don't submit those proposals. They're submitted to the federal agency by a company, but we have partnered as a sub-award quite a bit. And so when companies have questions on submitting those, since we have never submitted them because it's not how the program works, we have suggested companies go to the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity for information and help on submitting those proposals.
And they do offer support. Like they have people there who will walk through the grant process with people. It's great.
Yeah.
So good. All right. Well, terrific. So just kind of a philosophical question to conclude here, maybe. And Debbie, I should have mentioned that you're the associate director of the office as well. So thanks for setting this up and taking the time. As far as looking forward, what's kind of the vision for the research administration office, or what objectives does the university have?
Yeah. So as far as sponsored projects is concerned, we're here to support faculty in their efforts to obtain external research funds. And so we, and in essence, that then helps and enhances the experience of their students. We don't have any specific initiatives to focus on research commercialization, just a desire to further the mission of BYU and serve faculty better and submit compliant research proposals so that more are funded. However, we are aware and believe that commercialization of IP from research projects can be a part of fulfilling BYU's mission and bless the world. And so we're all about helping faculty, bless the world. And so our office, since that's not our role as far as commercialization, we are here to enable. We are here to enable and to work with tech transfer to help faculty and help better the world. So.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Susie, for your time today.